What if morality is more like a friendly suggestion? And what if the real rules of the world, the ones that actually dictate how things work, are written in the language of incentives? That's the explosive idea at the heart of Freakonomics. This really isn't a book about economics, not in the way you might think. It's more of a field guide, a decoder ring even, for the hidden side of everything. It's all about peeling back the surface of everyday life to see the strange, powerful, and often totally invisible forces that are really shaping our decisions.
And it all starts with a riddle. At first glance, you couldn't find two more different groups of people, right? School teachers and sumo wrestlers. But this question, this is the key that unlocks the entire Freakonomics way of thinking. It forces us to stop looking at the obvious and start searching for the hidden architecture that connects, well, pretty much everything.
So here's the core premise, and it's simple but pretty radical. The tools of economics aren't just for tracking money, they're for decoding human behavior. By applying a cold, hard, data-driven lens to questions we thought were about morality or culture or feelings, we can start to see the hidden side of it all. Everything from cheating to crime, even to how we raise our kids.
This quote just nails the book's entire perspective. It's about setting aside how we think people should behave and focusing with a kind of brutal honesty on how they actually behave when they're under pressure. It's not about being cynical, not at all. It's about using numbers to find some real clarity in all the chaos.
Okay, so let's solve that riddle, shall we? The teachers and the sumo wrestlers. The answer lies in one of the most powerful forces in our lives, something Freakonomics argues is, literally, the cornerstone of modern life: incentives. So here it is, laid bare. For a small but significant number of Chicago school teachers, the pressure of high-stakes testing, with bonuses and school funding on the line, created a powerful incentive to cheat. Meanwhile, for a sumo wrestler, getting that 8th win in a 15-match tournament, that is everything. It means keeping your rank, your salary, your status. In both cases, the pressure to succeed is just immense. And this is where the data tells such a fascinating story. A wrestler who's 7-7, he's right on the bubble. Statistically, he should win against a slightly better 8-6 wrestler less than half the time. Right? That makes sense. But on the final day of the tournament, he suddenly wins almost 80% of the time. The numbers don't just whisper, they scream that a deal is being made. You can just feel it. The 8-6 wrestler, he's already safe. He's got his winning record. So it looks a whole lot like he's letting the 7-7 guy win. And that's the first huge lesson here. If you want to understand why people do what they do, you have to understand their incentives. And not just the obvious economic ones, but the social and moral ones too. You have to figure out what really motivates people, not just what they say motivates them.
All right, the next big idea also kicks off with another strange pairing: the Ku Klux Klan and real estate agents. The hidden connection this time isn't incentives, but something just as powerful: information. Or more importantly, who has it and who doesn't. This is a classic concept in economics: information asymmetry. For centuries, experts, think doctors, mechanics, financial advisors, they held all the power because they knew things you didn't. This imbalance allowed them to push their own agenda because, honestly, how would you know any better?
The book uses real estate agents to make this crystal clear. An agent selling their own house, well, they'll leave it on the market for as long as it takes to get the absolute best price. But when they're selling your house, their incentive shifts. Suddenly, it's about closing the deal fast. Why? Because that extra $10,000 they might get for you after the commission split, that might only put an extra $150 in their pocket. So for them, a quick sale is often way better than the best sale. Their advantage is the information they have about the market, and they can use it to guide you to a quicker decision that benefits them.
But here's the good news. Today, that imbalance of power is shrinking, fast. The internet has essentially armed all of us with the data that used to be locked away. We can research car prices, medical diagnoses, home values, you name it. Information has become a weapon for the consumer, and it's completely changing the game. Now we get to the book's most famous, and definitely its most controversial argument. Back in the 1990s, all the experts were predicting this tidal wave of youth crime was about to hit. But the exact opposite happened. Crime just plummeted across America. The big question was why? And the answer the book lands on shows you just how far Freakonomics is willing to follow the data, no matter where it leads.
You know, everyone had a theory.
It was smarter policing. It was the booming economy. No, it was the new gun laws or the end of the crack wars. And look, some of those things did play a role, but none of them, not even all together, could explain the sheer scale and the precise timing of the drop.
The book's analysis found that the biggest factor, the real heavyweight champion, was something nobody was talking about, an event that had happened almost 2 decades earlier.
In 1973, Roe v. Wade legalized abortion. The book presents an argument based on the data. The women most likely to get an abortion back then were often in incredibly difficult circumstances: poor, single, maybe just teenagers. Statistically, their children faced a much higher risk of growing up in poverty and turning to a life of crime. So you fast forward to the early 1990s. That's exactly when that generation would have been reaching their late teens, their peak crime years. Except, millions of them simply weren't there. According to the book's data, this single distant factor accounted for as much as half of that massive historic drop in crime. Now, this is a deeply uncomfortable idea, no matter what your personal views are, but it reveals a profound lesson at the very core of Freakonomics. The cause of a huge, dramatic effect isn't always something obvious or immediate. Sometimes it's a quiet, subtle echo from decades before.
So the big question is, how do you actually start to think this way? How do you apply this? Well, the book gives us a mental model, a practical framework for looking at the world in this new light.
First, you have to question the conventional wisdom. The answers everyone just accepts. Second, always follow the incentives. Third, let the data be your guide, even if it tells a story you don't want to hear. And finally, be absolutely ruthless about separating correlation from causation. This is the toolkit. This is how you start to see the world differently.
And when you're hunting for those incentives, just remember, they come in 3 main flavors. You've got the obvious economic kind: money, bonuses, fines. Then you have the social kind: our fear of being shamed, our desire for a good reputation. And finally, the moral kind, which is all about our own conscience. The really powerful incentive schemes, they almost always mix all 3.
And this brings us right to the real takeaway, the thing you can use today. Think about your job, or a negotiation you're in, even your own family dynamics. What are the real incentives at play, not the stated ones? Where is information being held back? And what's the piece of conventional wisdom that everybody accepts that maybe, just maybe, isn't true?
You know, this is why this book has lasted. It demystifies the world. It hands you a set of tools and basically says, hey, you can figure this out. The complex systems all around us aren't just random chaos. They're governed by hidden rules. And once you learn to see those rules, you're no longer just a spectator in the game. Because in a world that's absolutely saturated with conventional wisdom, the most valuable truth is often the one you actually have to go looking for.